Wonder Woman came out. That was like 2 weeks ago, wasn't it? Wonder Woman was pretty good. I think that as somebody who knows what DC stuff is capable of, which as in knows the quality of what DC stuff is capable of in comics and in animation and even in video games, the DC superheroes have a large breadth of stories that they can tell, and they have a dynamic character range, and they are completely different fundamentally than how Marvel characters are. Everybody comparing Wonder Woman to the Christopher Reeves Superman from the 70s feels kind of accurate. It's not exactly like that, but I think everybody feels like that all of these characters, and especially the DC ones, have a lot of grim, emotional brooding going on. And the most inspiring of all those characters, and the reason I liked him in the first place, was supposed to be Superman. And as it turns out, Zack Snyder seems to really want him to be a villain. This is all kind of deferring back to Princess Diana, played by Gal Gadot. Gal Gadot. Gal, is it Gadot? Gadot?
Gal Gadot.
Gadot. The ex-Israeli military.
Gal Gadot.
The unnecessarily beautiful Gal Gadot. I can't. She is perfect casting, because you kind of have to have somebody who has a presence on screen, and I don't know if it's how she was directed or if Gal has officially become comfortable in the role after she kind of stepped into it with the Batman v Superman, probably with little to no direction to go off of. She feels really comfortable in the character, and she at least inspires just like this naivety, I guess. She has this almost childlike wonderment in wanting to understand this world of men and humanity and the good that they are capable of, and is equally as horrified when she finds out that not, one villain, one bad guy is not the end-all be-all of everything. So that being said, the character building and the character chemistry, particularly between her and Christopher Payne, the spy, is probably some of the best in the movie. It's the kind of superhero origin story that I haven't really felt like we got in terms of its tone since like the first Spider-Man. And I always referred to this type of superhero origin story that we've been getting post Iron Man, where all the Marvel origins are exactly the same. Your Iron Man, your Thor, your Hulk, your Captain America, your Doctor Strange, and your Ant-Man. They all feel like they hit the same beats, and they just kind of visually look a little different. This one, A, being set in World War II, B, being female-led, C, really getting, for the first time in years, because the Dark Knight trilogy was so grim too, this feeling of levity, this feeling of hope that DC always brought to the table in its lore. And so I think that when we reflect on those kinds of origin stories in superhero movies, we'll think back to the DC ones, Batman Begins and Wonder Woman, pinnacle of what those could be in terms of having their own voice. What criticisms do I have about Wonder Woman? The fight scene at the end.
Part of the problems are the fight scenes.
Well, okay, the fight scenes look good. The editing, not so much. The choreography, there's not a whole lot there, and they kind of try to make up for it with your Zack Snyder notes, with the slow motion, and there's a little too much of it. The scene that everybody raves about is the one where she comes up from the ladder in No Man's Land. There's the exposition about No Man's Land and what it is for the kids in the audience that haven't studied how awful and disgusting World War I was.
World War II was also disgusting.
Yes, but World War I was the old style of war, like that you would see from the Civil War. You had this traditional, your Minutemen, and then all of a sudden you have guns, automatic guns, and bombs, and gases. World War I was the one that was especially brutal, and it was one that was especially the turning point. So not only do you get that conveyed somehow in a superhero movie, aesthetically, but also in storytelling, she makes a difference in it. So I think that that's a very interesting thematic tone. But your No Man's Land scene gets all of that across, and it has some of the most interesting slow motion shots. But it really finally got across what her powers were actually capable of in human world. So yeah. And then other than that, the big climax at the end just feels like every other superhero movie. Not to get into major spoilers, but basically it seems like it's gonna have a relatively normal climax, and then it turns into one of those third act CGI explosion lights. One thing I will credit the third act of the movie for is it's not brevity, but at least it was concise, because it had the ability to only have a couple of beats throughout its final act, and you were following those, and they were edited together really well, so that you always knew what you were watching. And if you saw an explosion, at least I was able to make sense of what that explosion was doing there and what outcome it was going to have on the rest of the battle. And then the things that were not on screen quickly came back, and you kind of figure out what's going on there. It was also pretty funny movie. And the theme song for Wonder Woman has progressively become less grating to me. Yeah, it didn't fit with the rest of the movie tonally, but if they use it in Justice League, I guess, sure. And actually, news broke today. Did you see about the scoring of the Justice League movie? Yes, the score for the Justice League movie, now partially directed by Joss Whedon. The music is going to be by Danny Elfman. But it could make it properly silly. Maybe Joss Whedon looked at the Justice League footage and was like, this is a mess. I'll do some reshoots. The only other way that I can save this tonally is with a really goofy soundtrack. Danny Elfman. So I would give Wonder Woman 5 croissants. I don't know. I feel like if you eat too many croissants, you'll feel really over bloated and tired. And I think maybe 3 croissants is like that moment.
That sounds like a bad time. Eating 3 croissants could hurt somebody.
No, it just feels like a big, buttery, tasty mess that feels really good at the time, but at the end of the day, you're just like, oh, this is another pastry with a lot of butter in it. This is a bad analogy. I'm gonna talk about The Mummy now. Mummy was really bad. So The Mummy stars Tom Cruise, and that's about it. It's a very generic remake of one of the most generic franchises you can possibly think of, but Universal really wants in on that Marvel-style cash. Basically, the best of this movie is a really bad ripoff of Uncharted in that there's swashbuckling-ish adventures in a desert with ancient treasure hunting and randomly spouted gobbledygook, except Uncharted wasn't even particularly as good as the Indiana Jones movies that it was inspired by. So think like Walmart Indiana Jones. There's some really bad CGI, particularly some mercury that was trying to be excused as poorly rendered liquid, and that's supposed to keep Sofia Boutella's mummy self captive? I don't know. Basically, she's really pretty girl and her dad has a son baby in Egypt, so she couldn't be queen, kills people. Darkness, evil. It's fucking stupid. And we have Russell Crowe to tell us the entire time. So where you have a half-assedly told modern version of The Mummy that looks like a video game, you also have a movie that is attempting to be, hey, remember when Marvel had a shield? Remember when the Godzilla movies had, what were they called in Godzilla? Monarch. Godzilla had the Monarch. Marvel had the shield. These guys are called like Pendulum. Basically, super secret, sax force, tactical spy force to find and detain and probably commandeer the powers of ancient monsters, for which we already have castings of the Invisible Man and Dracula and Creature from the Black Lagoon and Bride of Frankenstein before we even have Frankenstein, because Aaron Eckhart already tried being Frankenstein. Whatever. It's kind of like, I feel like if I were to watch this as one of those Universal Studios roller coaster rides where you wear the goggles and it starred Tom Cruise, it'd be fun. Everybody would be posting about it on Facebook, like, hey, this is cool, go see this at Universal. And I'd be like, hell no, I'm not going to spend that much money to go to a theme park. Oh, yeah, and spoiler alerts, it's almost like they kind of had, like this weird I don't know if Tom Cruise is bringing people back to life as a plot device for this Dark Universe franchise, or if he's just supposed to be a Dracula, or is he a new mummy. But basically, the movie feels like it's not supposed to be over, but then the British girl who's there to be a scientist but isn't actually a good scientist is dead by drowning, and Tom Cruise ends up using the sacrificial blood of the Blade bullshit, bringing himself back to life, and like he sucks the life out of the mummy, and the mummy turns back into a mummy instead of being a sexy lady, and then he's like turned into Phantom of the Opera or something. And then the movie literally ends with Jake Johnson, who is like the best friend in American Werewolf in London, where he's like a creepy ghost with like bad makeup the entire time, and he's like in the mirror making hints about what to do and where to go, but he's supposed to be comic relief. Yeah, he's like back to life, and the line of dialogue is literally, "Hey Nick, it's really cool that you brought me back to life and everything, but what are we doing here?" And they're like in the middle of the desert. It's like a script written by a 12-year-old, and this movie would be cool to 12-year-olds who have never seen a decent adventure movie. And if that's all it's good for, is getting 12-year-olds into cool adventure stuff that's not in a video game, yeah, okay, sure, whatever. It's not the worst thing I've ever seen, but it's so overcalculated and plain that I can't really credit it for anything. 4 stars out of 20. What did I equate it to the other day? Like an untoasted bagel? Like an untoasted bagel that's been in the fridge because somebody doesn't know how to keep bread, so they put bread in the fridge, and it wasn't bothered to be toasted, so they just sliced it and put peanut butter on top of it, which is also a very plain thing. So imagine eating a cold, untoasted, stale bagel with peanut butter on it. And think about Tom Cruise, and you got this movie. He's actually a pretty good actor, but he has nothing to work with.
This is verbatim a quote from Tom Cruise in an interview about The Mummy, and this no. This is verbatim a quote from Tom Cruise about The Mummy on like Jimmy Kimmel or Jimmy Fallon, and he goes, "It's a lot of fun."
Keep you right on the edge of your seat. You're not going to want to take your eyes off the screen. It's a hell of a lot of fun.
And it's really scary.
You identify with these classic characters. They terrify us, and yet you feel sympathy for them.
Welcome to Prodigium.
He goes, it's a lot of fun.
It's a lot of fun. Join your Regal Crown Club card.
What?
You want to watch Terrace House?